Hello everyone, welcome back. Sorry, I just updated my OBS. Things you shouldn't do right before starting a stream, but everything looks to be working, which is kind of nice. They moved a couple of the UI things around. There's now a toolbar that I'm not used to seeing. It was like, cool. New stuff. Welcome back. Sorry for my absence last week. I was gone to the Microsoft Ignite conference. More on that in a moment. Tonight, after my stream a couple weeks ago, there was a few brave individuals who submitted some apps and said, hey, really like the code review. Would love it if you would take a look at this app and do a review of it as well. Great. So there are going to be two kind of very different applications. Both people who were saying that they're fairly new to WPF, so we are not going to judge them very harshly. Everybody starts somewhere, which is great. And both looking to see what they could improve and see what's there. In a couple cases, it was real specific of, hey, here's the areas I want you to focus on. And others, it was, hey, just kind of looking for a general overview. Great. So happy to do that. If you have an app and you like to get a code review on it, this one here, you can hit me up on any of the scrolly channels that are going by up there and get in touch and feel free to submit it. Can't promise how quick I will get to them. But I am always happy to queue them up. I personally love doing code reviews. It is one of the things that I enjoy doing. I know, it makes me weird, but still love it. So, couple things real quick from last week. I was at Microsoft Ignite. Microsoft Ignite is cool and awesome. And if you were not there or haven't seen any of the videos, you can go to ignite.microsoft.com. Underneath the session archive, you will find a whole bunch of stuff. Now, there's a lot of interesting stuff here, but if you are here for C# developer-y content, Ignite's a little light on that. This is more focusing on like the IT pro level stuff. There's a lot of Azure stuff. There's a lot of security related stuff, a lot of kind of the low code, like Power BI, business apps type situation stuff going on here. So depending on the content you're looking for, that's what a lot of Ignite was. I can't necessarily recommend any sessions. I spent, I think, like 90% of my time at the conference working it at the Expert Exchange Center, which was awesome. I enjoyed it. Several people came up and talked. Was pleasantly surprised at the number of people who walked up and said, hey, I've got a WPF app. And I was like, that's great. This is a wonderful time to talk about that. And then there was a couple of people who said, I have a WPF app running on .NET Framework 3.5. And I went, I'm sorry, what? So aside from that, upgrade. Upgrade is good. But a lot of people have a lot of old stuff that they are forced to maintain for any number of reasons. So, but with that said, there's a lot of cool stuff there. Quick story. Most terrifying question I got asked. I was working the .NET booth. Somebody walked up behind me and said, hey, can you teach us about .NET? I turned around. There was Damian Edwards, Jeff Corden, and David Fowler standing there. And I immediately was like, that's a terrifying audience to try to explain .NET to. If you do not recognize those names, those are three individuals who have a very big hand in a lot of the frameworks that you are likely using in .NET. AKA, they kind of know a thing or two about .NET already. So, on the note of .NET, .NET Conf happened to be going on at the exact same time as Microsoft Ignite. Don't know who did that scheduling. Kind of miserable. But if you are more of the .NET C# developer, this will likely contain more of the content that you are interested in. This is very much focused on the C# developer and all of the cool things you can do in .NET. If you click on this watch on YouTube, you can go through, you can get the keynote highlights, which is pretty cool if you just want the highlights reel of what's going on. There's a lot of good stuff about what's going on, brand new .NET stuff, what's new in Maui, what's new in C# 12. I personally always love watching the what's new in C# videos. These ones are always useful to me because I love them very much. The nice part, though, with a lot of .NET Conf is because C# and .NET are largely being built in the open, you can go to the language design meetings when they're streamed on YouTube. There's not a lot of secrets, so in some ways, this was just GAing a lot of stuff that had been warned about by a lot for those people who had paid attention to them. There's a cool thing. Keep an eye out for some, we'll call it photo bombing opportunities inside the keynote video. There's some good ones in there. But I won't, no spoilers. Next week, I may end up devoting a little bit of the stream to kind of covering kind of what's new in .NET 8 and C# 12. There's a few things that I really enjoy. There's not a ton in there. And for anybody already on .NET 7, if you change that 7 to an 8, that's probably the extent of the breaking changes on the upgrade. There's a handful of APIs that did get flagged obsolete. So if you have things like warnings as errors turned on, there may be a few things. But if you look at the list of breaking changes for .NET 8, there's not that many. And most of them affect people who are on preview builds. And if you are on preview builds, you've probably already updated anyway. It's been like a week. I mean, who doesn't update after the first week? I mean, really. Okay. Enough chitter chatter. Let's take a look at a couple apps. So, okay, so the first one that was submitted to me was Media Finder. So we are going to let me pull that up real quick. Okay, let's go in here. So this was the first app that was submitted to me, and if anybody is interested, here is the link. And this was one that was set up as more of a, hey, let's kind of do an overall review of this. Now, the first thing that I noticed scrolling down here was the fact that I saw my own name in the README, which was shocking. If you use my template, you are Visual Studio 2022 update after the first week. Yep. Well, and I'm on preview build, so I pull this stuff down like Tuesday's update day, which streaming on Wednesday with Visual Studio updates on Tuesday is always interesting. Yeah, first thing I saw was my name. If you use my template, you are more than welcome to include me in attributions. Not required, but thank you. Don't mind it, but always fun to kind of see it. It gives me a little bit of an idea of what I'm about to walk into when I see that something was created with my template, because it's kind of like, okay, I kind of know where we're going here. So pull open this. I've only kind of briefly fired this app up and run it once. And so some of this stuff I can kind of see immediately does appear to match my template, which is great. A lot of this looks like the defaults in here. I did notice a couple extra NuGet package sources, which was interesting. I don't know what's going on. Oh, these are configs. Never mind. Ignore that. I was reading this as sources. Never mind. We're going to ignore that. Moving right along. The other thing I noticed here, target framework is already revved to .NET 8. So 1 week in, already updated and ready to go. The next thing I will mention on, this is a pattern that I see happen quite a bit, where people like separating their project or separating their code into different projects. And a lot of this comes from the idea of it gives very clear layers of separation. The things like the internal modifier has a little bit more weight when you are separating your stuff out by project. And oftentimes it conceptually helps people put their app into well-defined layers. And it's really hard to accidentally get those layers backwards, because if you try to, reverse reference, that just doesn't work. So in that regard, these extra projects are a good thing. Something worth considering, though, is every project means a separate DLL, separate assembly, and every assembly is not free to load. Assembly load does hit hard, and I've seen people that take this pattern to the extreme, to the point of, there's, a separate project for interfaces, a separate one for individual classes, and that's going overboard. I don't know if this one's quite to that point. It's tweaking on my radar a little bit of going, this looks like it might be. But it also, what's going on here? Why is this thing showing up funny? We're going to look at that in a second. But it is something worth considering. Of separate projects for very clearly defined layers makes sense. But if you're just doing it for layering, there's kind of an argument to be made that perhaps namespaces are just as good in a single project and you don't take any extra hits. But with that said, we'll look at this. I'm curious as to this icon here. The fact that this guy, oh, hang on. I don't have my fancy pointer open, and I don't have my here we go. Yeah. That little icon. I don't know why that's doing that. So let's take a look. There's nothing there. Interesting. I'm not sure why this thing isn't just showing as a .cs file. I wonder, this could be new Visual Studio. I mean, it looks like a straight CS file. The other thing I immediately noticed, this is very cleanly structured code. The null bang gives me a bit of pause because I start to question what this is used for. And it looks like it's a null bang just to do this. The other thing, like, the null bang, I assume, is only here because if you don't assign it, you get the exact same behavior, but then you have this warning here. And I assume if we declare this nullable, which it rightfully is, then you have an issue here. My mild preference is to put the bang here to say, hey, I know something about when set progress is going to be called. But I mean, this is public abstract. In theory, somebody else could reference this project, derive from it, and invoke set progress before calling execute, and then it doesn't matter. Yeah, I have a project to work with, I assume a solution at work with 13 projects in it and regret it every time I open it. Yeah, and there are good times to break things apart. Sometimes you've got different heads, like one of my professional solutions that we have, you know, there's a web component to it, there's a WPF component to it, and we've got this shared project that goes between them. So there's times where it makes good sense, but if you've got a single head, a lot of times you can flatten some of these layers up. Yeah, no idea about this icon. This is, again, a minor thing here. It is accurately, the compiler is pointing that out, but that's not necessarily what we're here for. So let's fire this app up and we'll take a quick look at it. I mean, I will say, first impressions, I'm shocked that this is somebody's first WPF app. This is, I'm guessing, even though I was told this was their first WPF app, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that they've been a .NET developer for at least a little while. Because this screams of somebody who's been doing development for a bit. Oh, that's right. They did mention, they said they commented the tests out because they were going to swap out from XUnit to NUnit or similar, which that's fine. Whatever testing framework suits you is great. I've actually contemplated adding switches to my .NET New template so that you can plug in either like MS Test, XUnit, or NUnit if you want to plug in something different. I don't know if it's worth supporting anything else. In the .NET world, it's rare to come across a test project that isn't one of those three. That's pretty much everybody. Okay, so we're going to take a look at this. So even to the effort of pretty icon and everything. So the premise behind this application is wanting to extract, and again, I'm going to base this on my loose understanding of it, is to extract media files, images, videos, etc. from computer A so that you can copy them to computer B. I'm picturing using this on like a PC upgrade, or, you know, my mother calls me and tells me, oh no, I think I've lost all my pictures, and really you've just accidentally dragged them into another folder. That kind of thing, right? And I want to look around for it. This thing also appears to have some really interesting stuff about like extract archives, where it'll pull apart like zip files and look inside of them. And then it's not just doing extension analysis if you don't want it to. You can actually like look at metadata on the stuff and whatnot, which is cool because it's like pulling image sizes. That way you can say, hey, I'm not interested in like the little icon files. I only want images that are at least, you know, 800 by 600 or something. Like if you're taking pictures on your phone, you probably are getting something that's reasonably high-ish res. So if you're just hunting for the pictures you lost off your phone, you can grab that. And then you can do like video size checks and whatnot. So this is all pretty cool in my opinion. I kind of edited the testing thing here. I haven't even looked at where this is saving the stuff behind the scenes, but it saved it per app launch. It's got a depth parameter, and then if we come in here and hit run, this is one thing that's immediately giving me a bit of pause. I do not like the flashy jump of this dialogue, so we may take a look. I was told that doing things like control templates and whatnot was brand new. There's also this UI hang right at the end, which immediately makes me go, huh, I wonder what's going on there, because you see the progress bar stop, and I'm willing to bet there's something kind of weird going on. It could be related to this data grid. So this is a custom data grid that's going in here, and there's one thing that I'm noticing, and I don't know if it's necessarily a flaw of this data grid, but the toggle button that's used here, I'm noticing like there's some weird stuff going on with how this guy is set up. So that's kind of fun. But then you can change like your media type, and the only way I know this is a data grid is because I found the separators to resize this thing. Be big. Be big. There we go. Because you can come in here and you can do a lot of really fancy filtering with this. So there's, didn't find any videos, found some images. If I go all, media type all, export all. So I can see that I've got a whole, like, it found every file, because this is just a temp directory I use for dev stuff, so not shocking. There's a whole bunch of that kind of stuff littered all over this. There's a size filter. I think this is, the size filter may not be implemented, nor the name one, but there is at least, you can click to do the sorting. So there's some positioning stuff here that might be interesting. I'm also noticing that there is a arrow up and down. Hey, Izzy. Yeah, just looking this over. I'm going to go out on a limb. Even though you're new to WPF, this is not your first .NET project. I'm guessing you have a decent amount of experience here. Because there's a lot in here that kind of screams of somebody who knows what they're doing. So there are some fun things here. There's some interesting stuff with what I assume might be virtualization. I don't know why this thing's getting shifted over. That's kind of weird. And the thing that I'm noticing too when it's shifting over, even the underline is shifted. Which tells me that it's, when I see the underline shifted over, that tells me it's all the way on the data grid row. But yeah, so there's that. So let's take a look in the controls area and just take a progress overlay. Okay. So this is a mostly web apps and services. Okay, that makes sense. I was going to say, yeah, I don't know if you were on earlier when I was kind of commenting, but this looks like somebody who's done a decent amount of .NET before. Okay. Nullability is enabled. Is nullability enabled? I think because this is my default template, I assume nullability is still enabled. Yeah. So one thing to be aware of, especially when doing WPF stuff, this thing is getting away with it. But there's actually, this really should be declared nullable, because with dependency properties, it's near, unless you go through and implement like the coerce callback on the dependency property itself, which is buried up here, you basically can't prevent null from making it into a dependency property. The only reason the compiler doesn't flag it is because none of the WPF APIs are decorated with the nullability annotations. And so they're all in an unknown state. And so when you declare it like this, WPF goes, well, get value returns object, but the object it returns is unknown, whether it's nullable or non-nullable. So I'll just assume non-nullable. which is why the compiler is perfectly happy to have either form here and get away with it. But functionally, it is nullable. Oh, like the I command you got in here. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, because null will can definitely flow through on all of these. Value types are a different story because they don't support null. The only other thing that's interesting to me is the fact that there's this observable object attribute on here. So this thing here, for people unfamiliar, if we go and look at dependencies, packages, no, it's under analyzers. And if we look at the community toolkit, let's see, one of these guys here is going to have those are the where do I get the? I'm seeing the source generator here. Did this not actually generate? Might not have generated anything. Oh, there they go. There they go. I don't know why that thing was so slow. So observable object generator. So if we go here, expand this guy out, we should find progress overlay, which is right here. And you can see what this guy ends up generating behind the scenes for you. So if anybody's ever curious what actually goes into it, is it's generating your property changed event, all the base methods, and this is only here so that you can have the iNotify property changed interface on things that can't derive from observable object. Because ideally you derive from it. But it doesn't look like you need it. Because it's very unusual to have a UI object. And a lot of Nick Chapa's videos. Yeah, I get it. Justin Bieber, I'll tag your question here in just a second. It's a little unusual to need this attribute on any UI object itself. And I might even go as far as to say it's a little unusual to need to implement iNotify property changed on any of the UI objects, because the iNotify property change is usually on the source side of your binding, i.e. your view models. And the targets are usually dependency objects on the other side of your binding. Dependency object being the ultimate base class. If you run down this guy all the way up the thing, control, framework element, UI element, dependency, visual, dependency object. So this tends to be the base class. Oh, I guess dispatcher is technically below that. Yeah, but no one cares. Functionally, dependency object is the root of all your UI things, because this is what makes the dependency properties actually work. It maintains the underlying dictionary with all of that stuff in it. So I would imagine that you can probably get away with that with no ill effects, and then not need the generator. But overall, this is basically what I would expect. And now I imagine if I come down here, I find the control template for it. Yeah, so this is all in here. So start collapse. So one, I assume you must have XAML styler for this. So .NET .NET 8, which I don't believe the Lang version is set. Maybe it is. Lang version is set to latest, so it's going to be picking up C# 12. I personally like being explicit on my Lang versions rather than going latest, because latest means latest installed, which means you can sometimes get different behavior. Yeah, copy paste for material design extension. Yeah, I see people do a lot of Lang version latest. I just personally don't like it because of the potential chance that somebody's local .NET install gets slightly different behavior. Accelerate builds in Visual Studio makes things go fast. Yes. Benjamin, you want to go add that to my .NET templates? That would be a good one to turn on. It is very powerful. Okay, sorry, I missed a question from Justin Bieber, so I'm going to circle back. Good practice to display a string representation of data in a cell and sort the column by value. Datetime double int. So on the... Let me circle back to that one, Justin Bieber, because we got a couple data grid things that we're going to end up looking at. There is a sort member thing that you can do, but I don't know. Ideally, you can do it on the data grid text column, but something tells me that you can't do it on the text column, and you have to do the full data grid template column. We'll check that. Okay, so coming in here, sorry, I immediately have to auto format because 4-space indent makes me actually. You know what? Format XAML. There we go. What? Oh, you're unhappy because I'm debugging. Hush. Hush, hush, hush. Okay. Because this actually looks really good. And really, really clean, by the way. So the one thing that you can get away with... So when you are inside of a... Oh, this is content template, not control template. Never mind. I was going to point out that you could leverage template binding, but this is content template, which is different. Interesting. Hang on. Why do you have a content template and a control template in the same thing? Something's weird about this, and I'm not sure what it is yet. Horizontal and vertical alignment stretch on a grid you shouldn't need. Those are defaults. One of the big changes between WPF, oh, it's from Material Design Extensions Progress Overlay. Ah, got it. Good to know. One of the big differences between, or I should say improvements, when they created WPF from WinForms, the controls never resize as the window resize, so you can always pick out a poor WinForms app. You resize the window, and all the controls stay docked in the top left. It's ugly, but that's how it works. WPF, they flipped it on its head and said, no. By default, things are going to expand to fill their contents, i.e. vertical and horizontal alignment stretch. Interesting. Okay. Okay, so that's interesting. If I look at generic, this is just bringing in the dictionary and then a bunch of converters. I think I just added the text bit so I could add progress status updates. Okay. Got it. So we're going to ignore all of this. Order card content control, and that's probably why you have... I assume when you say text bits, you're talking about like the text block here. Because this is what's going to get shown in that dialog that pops up, because there's the spinny progress bar on the left and then a text block on the right. The only reason I say this looks a little weird to me is generally when you're doing custom controls, the content template isn't what you set, because you have access to the entire control template right here. So rather than having this content control and passing it in, oftentimes what you would end up doing is actually bringing this entire template in its place. Here, we'll just demonstration. Oftentimes you do something a little more akin to this. Paste. And then this guy goes away. And then this guy becomes... Do we even need him anymore? Format XAML. We don't even need him anymore. Yeah, the idea here would be inside of the control template, rather than a content control, hypothetically, if we wanted to include him, right? You do something, format XAML, you do something like content presenter here. That way, users of your control could, if they put something in between your starting and ending tags, it would end up here, and then the template stuff just works all the way through. Versus if you do the control template and have that kind of weird situation, you get into a weird kind of awkward thing where somebody technically can override your content template from outside, versus now they're forced to kind of use it inside or replace the whole template, which is generally a little closer to what you would expect. So we'll put this back for now, but sounds like I might need to go do a PR to the material design extensions repo. Oh, nice. So one thing that is interesting that might be worth calling out is pinvoke is dying, and it's not dying. Well, it kind of is. So it looks like, so one, props for formatting your stuff appropriately like this. Most people do the math themselves, and that's why I clicked on this one, because it's easy to mess up. This is the proper way to do it, but there is a cleaner approach because people have built the pinvoke libraries. However, and this annoys me, Microsoft has marked this as archived, or I guess Andrew Arnott marked it as archived. The replacement is here, this CS Win32, but its NuGet package is still in preview. So that's kind of annoying. So one's archived, the NuGet packages are still there and still work. The replacement's available and you can use it today, but it's a preview NuGet package. The big advantage here is to leverage this rather than having to write this type of code anymore. What you can do instead is you bring in the NuGet package, which comes with a source generator. And then you add a, native functions.txt. Native methods.txt. And you just write the methods that you want. So in this case, string format byte size, and you don't even need the W. And then the source generator goes, I got you, goes and finds the right native API and builds all this out for you, which is awesome. Now, you already have this in and it's working. Great, fine. Not a big deal, but it is a thing to be aware of. But I mean, overall, this is a very, very clean project. Like, yeah. So points awarded. This is very nice. Let's see here. I think the export view was one that I wanted to take a peek at. Yeah. The other thing, I don't know how many of these are referenced. I'm just picking on this one because it keeps showing up. There is depending on how prevalent some of your converters are, one, points for putting them at the root level of your user control. That's where they should be. My view models are under the XAML file too. Oh, that's clever. Okay, I like that. Now we gotta go look. I gotta go look. Nice. Nice. Okay. This is clever. So for those people who are a little confused, this whole idea that you have your XAML.cs nested under your XAML, the only reason that works is the built-in .NET SDK sets up this attribute called dependent upon on files that line up with this particular naming scheme. That's the only reason these ones get nested under. You can control that, and you can either add to it, which is what's being done here, or you can even turn it off if you don't like it, and literally have them show up as files. Because on disk, If you open up the folder, you'll see two files sitting there, one right next to the other. But sometimes the Solution Explorer is kind of cool and lets you leverage this nesting. Also, anybody who likes to play in VS Code land, there's a Solution Explorer now in VS Code. Very slick. Check it out. One of the new things that came out in the announcements of .NET Conf, I think it is under the What's New with .NET Maui talk. Don't quote me, but I think it's there. So that's kind of cool. I don't know how long it would have taken me to find it without searching the object by name. But that's pretty cool. Okay, so observable object attribute here. Is there a reason? Is there a reason this guy doesn't just derive from observable object? Oh, wait a minute. I think I know the answer to that. And this might come back because this is in your helpers one. Let me guess. This guy, no, he has a VVM toolkit. I would be tempted to tell you to derive this guy from observable object rather than leveraging the source generator here. This works by all means, but it also there's an analyzer that comes in the MVVM toolkit where it will flag if you use this unnecessarily, because this does kind of bloat your assembly, because it means the source, you don't write extra code per se, but the source generator and the compiled object inside your DLL, if you do this on every view model, for example, the notify property change method, you end up with, I don't know, 10, 15 copies of identical methods in your compiled assembly. Versus if they derive from the common observable object, there's only one instance of it. So if things like assembly size and like method table performance matter, that's the reason for not just abusing this everywhere. An app this size, it won't make a difference. Oh, and then it is leveraging EF. Cool. Cool. And this is very, very clean. Binding operations. Oh, I see. Okay, so you're doing your collection view source here. And then doing this. This is interesting. This is probably not something that you actually need to do. So if you do collection view source dot get default view, this will give you, unless you have a reason to be holding on to this, you register up the filter, but you don't need the filter, because you can set the filter on the, this guy here also has your filter available to you. So typically, rather than doing this type of stuff, what you end up doing is something more like I collection view, and this will probably break a handful of things, but then you do this, and then you don't need any of this stuff. All of that goes away, and then this goes from view. Had issues with nothing working on filtering. Interesting. Because this should give you identical behavior. The other thing to be aware of is the filter here. Oh, you're building up a multicast delegate. Hold up. We got to look at this a little closer now. Oh, interesting. Okay. So collection view source get default view is going to return you the same instance given the same collection, which is why you can usually get away with this in a lot of cases, because the UI objects like list view, data grid, etc., they're going to do something similar under the hood, which means they end up with the same collection view. These guys here, the filter isn't the same. Let's take a look at this predicate object. Yeah, so the API is slightly different. The desired API that it's looking for here is going to be something like object item, right? And then this thing returns a bool. The part that gets interesting, so that makes us happy, is you're doing plus equals on a delegate, not an event, which is going to combine your delegates together. That's a little awkward. I would be more inclined to do something like private bool apply filter, right? And technically, like, once again, because it's declared unknown nullability for the type here, you can get away with declaring it nullable. If you've got enough guarantees that your collection doesn't contain null items, then you're probably safe. If you use a data grid where you allow the user to add items, you are not safe because the data grid will insert into your collection. But if you control that, so I would tend to do something a little more like this, and then something like return apply filter item, and then rinse repeat, right, all the way down, and dot dot dot, right, all the way down through there. This would be probably the way I would approach it instead. I'd be curious to know what doesn't work with that. Now, obviously, it does require adjusting all these. I do love the word tri-state Boolean. And I'm not making fun of you. There was a production project I worked on where I think I literally wrote the exact same thing. So, totally respect it. Totally respect it, especially with false equal to 1. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Yeah, I'd be curious to know what filtering problems come up going this approach, because that would be what I would expect to go through and do. Also, one thing I didn't show off on this app, and I should go show it off. We'll see. How can I leave this here without void object? I can just grab this signature and put it back. I am not an idiot. There. Then we can comment this. Do this. No, we can't. We're just going to leave filter broken. One thing I did want to give you big props on as well, the file picker that you did. Did I drop the F, or is there just legitimately an F missing from... the studio? You want to show me where the no ref is? Oh, media file view. Wait, get default view through a no ref? Sorry, this one, this I have to diagnose. Oh, yeah, because the collection isn't instantiated yet. Oh, wait a minute, hang on. I botched something horribly. Because I've got the same thing on the left and right hand side of the equals. Stand by. Stand by. I'm just an idiot. This guy. What was the thing supposed to be? Let's see. Media files, view source, source discovered files. That's what I was supposed to put there. Yeah, that makes a little more sense. The observable collection. Yeah. There we go. Non-null value. There we go. Non-null value. Okay, this thing I wanted to give you props on. I have very rarely seen somebody build their own file picker. I realize this probably came from the extensions library, but this was kind of slick. Like, not gonna lie, having something like this, it is definitely not bad. And like this was kind of cool what I saw. The only thing I don't like is I'm used to being able to use keyboard shortcuts to automatically like jump to the first, thing with an M in the name, and that doesn't work here. But still, props there. Like that was kind of cool. That was kind of cool. Okay, I think that I don't know if there's anything else you want me to take a look at, Izzy, let me know. But overall, I think what you've built out here is really quite good. Yeah, overall it's very good. I'm gonna think on this view model setup. Part of me is like I can't say I see it causing discoverability problems with people, but at the same time, I also kind of like it because I've been favoring keeping my view models close to my views. So I kind like I don't know if I put it in my template, but maybe I put it in and leave it commented out if people go through and do it. Also, the spell checker's flagging. I'm guessing you may not have it enabled. It is a preview feature, I believe. I don't think they've released it. Yeah, so you have to actually, if you turn on the spell checker in Visual Studio underneath environment preview features, my template should have it picked up. I believe it's a preview feature that's even in the regular Visual Studio, even if you aren't on preview. Yeah, this. Yeah, and this to do is a very good question. At the end of the day, it's gonna. The big question here on directory, current directory, oftentimes is going to depend on your deployment solution. Because if you do like a single XE, Xcopy deploy type situation, it's probably reasonable. If you do an installer of any kind, it's probably not reasonable because you'll pick up your installed location, which could be like C program files, which is a protected directory, and then you get hosed. So that the to use or not to use this really depends a lot on whether on your deployment strategy. Some apps it's fine for, other ones it's not. I mean, and a lot of this, like your XAML is very clean. Um, I also very much approve of this idea here of keeping all of your margins and paddings even numbers and even bases of them. It just kind of helps keep everything lined up nicely. I did see a hard coded height. Which text box is this? That's fine. Hard coded height on a accepts return multi-line text box. Totally acceptable. I just always twitch when I see hard coded heights and widths, and I always have to go and look and see why that's the case. But in a lot of these, it makes perfect sense. Like this text box here, it might make sense to do min width. Like I don't think your progress bar can build because this guy here, what's its max? Oh, and it's actually the slider's going off the edge. Why is it going off the edge? Interesting. Why is that the case? Oh, width is being bound to actual width of the stack panel. Oh, so this guy's that seems like a mistake. Yeah, I suspect that's a mistake to have this guy's width be bound to the stack panel width. And because you're already inside of a grid itself. I would imagine a much better solution is just to set a min width on the grid or the stack panel and keep this thing bigger rather because right here just looking at what's catching my attention is the border box. This extension on the side, I didn't notice that it was being cut off when I was using the UI, but I just was playing around with it. I suspect the fix here is just to delete the width binding. Because then, right, that thing dials in. It's probably not exactly what you want, which means what you probably want something here is more like a min width and maybe like 200, 250, get us close to where we were. 225. That's too big. Something like that, maybe. Quick high fixes while using hot reload. Okay. Yeah, I suspect something like that is actually what you're going for. Technically, so this is a stylistic thing. Width 1 star is the default, so you could also just omit those if you want. Stylistic. Some people like to put them in. Some people favor verbosity in a lot of cases. I sometimes favor not setting defaults, but I do it so inconsistently. Nice use here on the data object pasting. Very nice. Yeah. Nullable long to string converter. Property changed. Very nice. Very, very nice. It's a little disappointing some of that nullability requires a converter in the middle, but I've had to do the same type of situation because the data binding validation it never seems to work the way we want. But then, nice use of dynamic resource here. This one here, I would tell you to go with static resource. Because dynamic resources are for things that could change at runtime, things that could change at things that aren't going to change, you want to use static resource for, which is why it's typically static resource on the style. The shadow depth, I think there's actually a if you want to, you can just do, rather than setting the effect yourself, this attached property exists. I'm sorry, elevation assist. That's right. I forgot. We changed it. Where is it? Elevation, and then what's the values here? Sorry, this is yeah. So you can get away with this. The reason for this rename is to better align with the material design spec. I think a 5 is somewhere around like a 12. And in most controls will respect this attached property. So, but yeah, doing the effect directly certainly works. It's the same thing that the material design library does under the hood. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a ton of feedback for you. Like, there's a lot of stuff here that's really nice. I'm curious why you did the accessor keys for cancel and add, but not clear. I don't know if that's intentional or not. I mean, again, like that's not. This is why I was commenting. I was shocked that this was your first WPF app because little things like the accessor keys, that's not something that people typically do, especially correctly the first time. And excellent use of dock panel here as well. What letter for clear? Yeah, I tend to go like my default setting would be to pick on the L, but yeah, like a lot of this stuff is just like this is really good work in my opinion. Yeah. Yeah, so overall great code structure. a lot of a nice use of a lot of advanced stuff in here. Do you have any multi-value converters? Let's look here. There was one more thing I was going to show. No multi-value converters. Okay, bummer. There's a cool thing. So one of the things that got added in C# 12 is list pattern matching, and it is absolute gold for or list expressions. List pattern matching got added in C# 11, .NET 7, but list expressions got added. Multi-value converters are like made for those things. It is gorgeous. And string. Oh, there's also a slightly cleaner trick here. You can just do this. Oh, I guess you lose the pattern match then in because you're trying to return the pattern string. Either way, you don't need the null check. This pattern match, these two will guard you from the null case. But again, like aside from small minor things like that, I don't have any objections. Like this is for a very first WPF app, you should be incredibly proud. This is great work. This is really, really good work. Interesting. I'm now immediately curious where else the dispatcher is getting picked up. Oh, it's only right there. Triad scoped just for the required bit here to be able to pass the dispatcher into the snack bar message queue. Got it. Cool. Very, very nice work. Yeah. If you come up with anything specific you want me to dive in on, let me know. But overall, I think this is a very well done application. So, points awarded. I don't know if there's anything here worth pushing back into a branch. If you want me to push any of this back into a branch, let me know, and I'll spin one and push it real quick. But for the most part, aside from like right clicking and doing format XAML with XAML tests or XAML styler, was progress overlay and filtering. Yeah. Progress overlay and filtering. Let's see. Export view. Progress completed view. So this guy here. And I think this goes back to the question Justin Bieber asked earlier. No, this is not the... Where is the... Discovery view? Is this the one that has the... There, yeah, this is the one that has the data grid. Drawer host dock panel. Take me to that. Data grid, there we are. Sure, yeah, I will push a branch here in just a moment. Yeah, because this is what I wanted to look at here, because this is where there is the... So, Justin Bieber, answering your question before, sort member path is what I was trying to get at. I don't know if it exists on text column. Oh, it does. Okay, so that would be the way to go around doing it. So if you have a separation between how you want to display it versus how you want to sort it, that's often the easy way of doing it. I want to sort the column. Yeah, so what you would end up doing is binding to, because you want to display by the first property. So this would be binding prop 1, and then sort member path would be, prop 2. Like that. And that'll separate it. The slight limitation here is sort member path is only works when you have a good property that you can do that with. The moment you don't have a good property to do that with, your two choices are code behind, because you can dive into the there's events that you can register up on to deal with it, or you go and create yourself property. They're kind of the only two choices. Sorry, just make sure I hit this here. Progress overlay and filtering. Run worker completed. It's stage 1 worker. Yeah, because you derive from background worker. That's okay. That's something I haven't seen done a lot. This certainly works, just to be clear. There's nothing wrong with this approach. This is how background progress was done in a lot of .NET. The slightly newer way is just using tasks with iProgress. That I would say is the newer, nicer way, but there's nothing wrong with this type of approach. The one thing I am interested in looking at is there's nothing necessarily bad here. You do have to be. I'm willing to bet those UI hangs are in these completed event handlers. But I would have to other sync methods internally. Yeah, so the quote unquote simpler way, and it's a bigger refactor, so take this with a grain of salt, but do background stuff, right? And then the other one is like you create a progress of string, right? So maybe current file progress, right? And the progress bit, this one is where you start getting back into your event handlers to be able to update things as you see fit. But these things are now composable. And so inside of your task.run, you literally just do, as you iterate over the files, current file, progress, and then there's, what is it? No, where is the report? Why am I in the wrong thing? Provides an iPro that invokes callbacks on each. Yeah, but I want the iProgress. Overload here. Action handler. There it is. So this gets awkward because this thing explicitly implements the interface. So it does. So like it doesn't show that there's a report method here, but if you look at the interface, it has to have a report method. So it is there. So it gets weird. So report method exists here. My file. But if you do this, doesn't work. That's fun. Discoverability nightmares all day long. So things like this definitely would be the quote unquote newer way of going through and doing it rather than background workers. Because that basically everything that you have inside of this execute method ends up getting put inside of a task.run. And then rather than calling set progress, your this guy here could take in, say, an I progress of string, and it would then just on that I progress of string, you would call report and pass this thing through. So things like that. There's enough differences between these APIs. It may be a pain in the neck to deal with. Um, little things here. Right? This is why I need the spell checker, because I can't spell either. Um, um, is there anything else like that where the interface shows up on but not on the instance? I would have to rack my brain a little bit for where all the places are. It's a little unusual to find a class inside of the BCL that you can create, so the constructor is public, that does it. I'm sure there's probably others. Most of the time it's things that I've created myself, but oftentimes when things have explicitly implemented an interface, it's sort of designed so that you use the interface. So something like this could be a potential way of refactoring these workers so that you don't need to use background worker anymore. Because background worker is kind of an older deprecated one. Like, you could drop this base class and replace some of this with task.run, because then what this ends up getting you, where do you actually kick off this thing? Because somewhere in here there's a start call. Find all references. Where are you? Is busy, run worker async. Yeah, so functionally you could re-implement this with tasks all the way through and go through and build that out. Again, not a big deal in my opinion, but it's a slight improvement. And it may be worth double checking. I think this actually, the background worker will invoke completed on your UI thread. So that hang right at the end, I'm willing to bet is one of these completed handlers doing a bunch of work. And then there's probably a little bit of the hang as it's populating all of the items in the data grid. The reason why you do it, so the idea with explicitly implementing an interface is so that only people who are attempting to act on your object via the interface are the ones expecting to see it. Because in this case, there's a subtle difference between iProgress and progress. iProgress is expected to be used inside of the task, just to report, because you'll note here, if I look at it from the interface perspective, I don't see the event. Whereas the progress itself is meant to be used by the caller, because they're going to be the ones focused on either using the constructor that takes in the action or registering up for this. So there's a subtle difference between each of those. How does that work with the UI hanging? Originally had issues. So if the if I remember correctly, and the completed event is coming back on the UI thread, what that's going to end up meaning for you is the simple workaround right now is task.run and immediately kick yourself off of the UI thread and back onto a background thread where you can then do additional work. Given that it was at the end, I suspect it's probably either the stage 2 or stage 3, and it's very easily like this DB context save. Like, that wouldn't shock me at all, because that's going to be writing off to a database somewhere. I presume SQLite or similar. Because none of these other things should really hang your UI. Search cleanup, perhaps. I don't know what this does. Cleanup working directory. Yeah, there's some IO there. That's probably not something that you want on the UI thread. So there is a balancing act. If it's on the UI thread, it makes it easy to touch a lot of things, but it also means that you can shoot yourself in the foot and hang your UI if you do anything that takes a decent amount of time. So simple workaround, task.run, and put everything that doesn't need to be on the UI inside of the task.run. And that'll just kick it off and let it go. Now, that also opens you up to timing problems, because if you put, for example, just this inside of a task.run, this is now happening asynchronously to this being kicked off. So there's some questions there about what makes sense on what should be put where. Yeah. So putting appropriate stuff, again, for example, if it is like, say, and you can always do like poor man's, like, you can use the diagnostic tools, but the other thing you can do is you can just go stopwatch, start new, and then literally just, SW stop, right? And then, console write line, and then log out the stopwatch elapsed, and that'll very quickly tell you where, like, what sections are taking the most amount of time. Like, that's poor man's benchmarking, is straight up stopwatch and just measure the time and see how long it takes. Hey, JC. Yeah, so I would potentially say, looking there, it's on my list in the README even. Ah, got it. Cool. Yeah. Sweet. Yeah, like I said, I think this is awesome. I think you have done a phenomenal job here in all of this. So this is actually a really slick looking application. Command parameter. Really? That surprises me. Sorry, I see a command parameter and a relative binding to the drawer host. Why is this guy is that a mistake? No. That's interesting. So this is also a bit of an anti-pattern to be aware of. In general, you want to keep UI properties out of your view models. And this takes a little bit of effort in a lot of cases to go through and deal with. So, for example, the easier workaround here is I would have an observable property for the right drawer in my view model that's a bool, and bind it to that, rather than bouncing it back and forth. Because the one thing that you will find very quickly, the moment you go to start writing any sort of unit tests over this view model, this is going to become a problem. Same with this thing here, is it's going to end up being a pain in the neck to deal with. So the way you end up with, because I assume this is supposed to be drawer content, just given that it's around the drawer host. That I've done locally. Okay, cool. Yeah, this guy here generally becomes a view model object that there is a template or similar for in your view. That way you can keep it clean and out of it. Oh, yes, there we go. There we go. This right here. That's that C#12 goodness. Mwah. So for people who haven't seen the syntax, go look at the what's new in C#12 page. It's awesome. List expressions. Also, that eliminates calls to like array.empty and similar. So No longer need that method. As long as you can use she's C sharp 12. Ah, cool. Sweet. Well, great work on this, Izzy. And like I said, feel free to ping me. And I'm happy to take another look at it. Okay, so we're going to jump to a different app that was sent to me. And this one, there is no GitHub repo for or similar. Collection initialized as IO was super surprising. However, yes, it is. Points for looking at the IL. So much longer than new list. But perform it. So one of the things that I immediately noticed here was a lack of a dot solution file. So, and again, not a bad thing, but one thing to keep in mind is generally, so if you double click on the project, it'll get you into this. And when you hit save, or save all, it'll actually prompt you to create a solution file. Because all the solution file is, if we take a look at this guy in like, where's VS Code? Here. Just once, please. I don't want to always open my solution files in VS Code. That sounds like a nightmare. Because all the solution file is, and we'll back that up a little bit, is a list of projects. And it's ugly to look at, and there's these massive GUIDs, which is why we usually don't touch them directly. But it is the default format that Visual Studio wants to have. So we're going to fire this app up, and I believe it's going to hang on launch. And we'll take a look at it. We'll take a look at a few things. So, beep, beep, beep. And hung. Okay, so this is one of the things that I ran into, and I noticed, and this is a worthwhile debugging trick here. So you started a project, it's clearly running, it hasn't crashed, your output window isn't doing anything, and you end up getting to this point where you see like your thread pool is slowly draining because things don't need to be working. So the runtime dials it down. The only hint is that there's this SQLite exception in here. If we come into not assembly info, app dot this, because we assume that there's not an overridden main method. This guy here is the first thing that catches my mind, is a absolute file path. Works great if you have a single user, doesn't scale out well. So typically, and just looking at the path here, this looks like a default repo path. So the simplest thing to do is to change this out here. Now, this is subtly going to put the DB in a different place, right? Because this one here seems to imply that the DB goes right alongside of the root of the repository. And the moment I do this, what's going to happen is the fully qualified path is actually then going to be inside of my bin debug directory. And I'm going to pick up, what was the thing called? My database. My database.db. And it's going to end up showing here. So worthwhile noting, subtle difference, but in general, relative file paths or looking up the working directory are similar. Some people get really fancy, and if you assume that you're inside of a bin debug, again, this will work for development, not for production. Let's see, what is it? Debug bin project. Like some people will do relative paths and just walk their way up to get to the repo root. There's also an extension method that a particular person in the chat has written. Yeah, chess one every day. Yeah, it's only for you. So in that case, if you are the solo user, works great. I'm going to switch it there just for the purpose of getting things in. So this application, and keep me honest, Lisa, if this is correct. But the intent here is basically a taskless style application, just to keep yourself on task of what needs to be done when, I think, based on usage of what I saw. I also get the impression that you're a bit of a designer. Just seen somebody who went to the effort of putting in like cards with rounded corners and overlaying and offsetting them. Um, I'm guessing that was a bit of fun design type work. And even here, so this guy pops a window. It's unusual to see somebody actually go to the effort of like drawing these lines behind. Now there's a little thing that happens with your purple one. As things get short enough, you can see it starts to kind of come up. So you may want to just set this. This is one of the few cases where just setting the size on or the length on these rectangles to just ye big of 2000 or something ridiculous. Well, actually 2000 4K monitors these days somewhere in the 8 to 12,000 range. Ye big. Just so that they're always going to be bigger than the window. You can do things that are fancy where you do like value converters and get the size of the window and do all of that, or you can just make them big and call it a day. And again, not a big deal. It's just one of those little things that I noticed as I was sizing the window. For my WPF days, WPF, for my WinForm days, the first thing I always do is grab windows and I resize them to see how they resize and go, how well did people handle the resize bits? Right? And you can kind of start to see things because everybody tests their windows at the default size and forget that resize is a thing. This is also a case where I might suggest on this one, the window itself has a min width property and a min height. You want to be careful to not abuse these too much. Uh, Thanks, Lisa. Yes, I did see your other message as well. But in some cases, like there's no reasonable way for this window to be usable at this height. So setting a min height of what is reasonably acceptable for your window is probably not a bad idea. And so here we have something like test, and we're just going to pick on some stuff here. Let's see, due date, and here, and status of just started, medium, budget, $2 because cheap, and then save. And I think this is where, yeah, I see the system not supported exception here, and I think that's what we're going to dive into first. But didn't do that one yet. Oh, good. As long as it's on the radar, like it's. So just to be clear, it's very easy, and my QA people are always keen to point this out to me. It's very easy to break software. It's very easy. Most software breaks if you just look at it wrong, and good software breaks only when you like poke it really hard. It's rare to find software that's bulletproof, and usually the stuff that has been around for years and years, because sometimes it just takes time to hash all that stuff out. Okay, so we're going to chase down this system not supported exception first. I think is where we're going to start. So this is for those people watching. This is following a slightly different pattern for WPF called the service locator pattern. It's not necessarily the one that I use in my template, but it's a fairly common pattern that you'll see documented all over the internet. Remember, WPF was released in 2005. We are coming up on 2024, so we're shooting for that 20-year anniversary for WPF. That's gonna be great. Also, I will highlight .NET 8 WPF did get new features. For everybody who says WPF is dead, we got new features. Features that we probably should have gotten back in Windows 7, but the directory picker dialog. There, we now have direct support for that. You no longer have to pull in NuGet packages or WinForms or pinvoke to get the useful directory picker dialog. It's just right in the box now. So, huzzah! Like I said, we should have gotten it back in Windows 7 era. Okay, so I believe inside of here we have this stuff here. Now I want to double check async relay command. This is Community Toolkit MVVM. So So you've got the observable object, task edit. One thing I will also point out real quick is if you are running a reasonably new version of, well, actually I can look. You're running net 6. Perfect. Good enough. One of the things that you have is what's called a file scope namespace. It's really obnoxious because if you do like add new file, the default templates in Visual Studio still default to doing this crap. Um, File scope namespace looks like this. You go to the end of your namespace line, semicolon. It'll automatically delete all your curly braces and unindent everything because this first level of indentation is not that useful. And with very few exceptions, you never have more than one namespace per file. Like, there's a handful of exceptions I can even think of where you might want nested namespaces in a file. Very rarely happens. Most of the time, you can just do that. And then the other thing you can get away with is rather than doing this async relay command, like this, oh, you've done both. Interesting. Hang on. I was going to tell you to use the attribute, but you've done the attribute. So why? Oh, I bet you I know what it is. So when you do the attribute like this, it generates up you it generates a property that, because you have save command. Where's this property? I'm just going to copy this real quick. And then we're going to jump down to this. So when you use this attribute behind the scenes, what's getting generated for you is something that looks like this. And so we can go here and underneath analyzers, community toolkit source generators. And there's the relay command generator. And we are on task edit. Right? What do task edit view model? It didn't generate anything. How did it know to not generate anything? Something's up. Task edit view model. It's an observable object. It's partial. Where? Huh? Save task async command. Yeah, why does it think that it needs to be... Oh, is it just save task command? Is that what it's generating? I'm trying to get a conflict. This. Oh, it drops the word async. There it is. Okay. So it is generating this command for you behind the scenes. So you shouldn't need both. So you shouldn't need the relay command attribute as well as the property. What I would suggest instead is that we cheat and change this to save async. We come up here, we delete this out of the constructor, and we delete this out of here. JC bottom one. Shoot, I just saw that comment. I might need context. Hopefully I saw it too. I assume that was related to the name of the command. So that will still work, right? But what we need to do now is go and make sure our view is bound up appropriately. So let's go and check that. Task edit view. Yeah, see? Like that. These are kind of clever, but like I was saying, I think what I might do here, let's see. Height of 531, I heard problem solved. Oh, actually, that's going to be a little issue. Just going that big is going to skew with the rotation. Yeah, I'll let you play with where that should be. Generally, I tell people don't use margin for positioning. I need to refine that statement. This is acceptable for positioning when you're doing like pretty stuff like this. The other thing you can do is you can look to like just make an image and set that as your window background. Because when you do so part of it is with without this render transform on here, and just to be clear, like you see this pattern occur a lot where people create a transform group and they put all of these things in here. You're only actually using the rotate transform. So if you don't need multiple transforms, just save yourself some trouble and flatten it. Right? If all you're going to do is the rotate transform, just do this. Because all you're doing is saying, okay, I want to rotate this thing about 37 degrees off of its center of where it's rotated. So that's all that thing's spinning on. Because if we were to take this rotation out of the mix, what I expect to see is a vertical rectangle, right? Right up and down. And the reason this messes up when I do 999 is because this thing's going to rotate about the center. So if you imagine where this thing is sitting, you can see that this thing's margin offset is like that. What you would so let's make this easy because my head doesn't want to do math right now. Rather than minus 67, we probably offset this minus 5,000 plus the height. Right? So it's going to be something more like that. And then if we put the transform back on, yeah, it's going to be slightly, so it's slightly off because I'm rotating about the center of that rectangle, and the rectangle is 10,000 wide or 10,000 tall, and I kind of want the rotation to not necessarily be about the center. So this margin needs to be minus to transition before the rotate. Yeah, something similar to that might work better. The other thing that you can do is rather than using so right after I said not to do that, the other thing that you can do is translate transform. So rather than using the margin to push this thing over, you could actually do the X transform across and then rotate. So this margin, so WPF occurs in two passes. There's the layout pass where it looks at things like margin, horizontal and vertical offset, and it figures out how big everything is in its position relative to its containers and all that. And then there's a render pass. The render pass, it's basically like the first pass is kind of like drawing the lines on your painting. And then the second pass, the render pass, you take out your crayons and you color in all of the boxes that you've drawn, right? But on the render pass, maybe you're like, there's a rotate transform, so I'm going to tilt my hand, 37 degrees while I'm coloring this rectangle, and so I'm not coloring in the lines anymore. That's effectively what a render transform is you want to color outside the lines. So you could do a translate transform to shift it over rather than a margin, and then your rotate and translate are occurring in the same render pass rather than trying to do part of it in the layout pass and part of it in the render pass. Either way, again, not a big deal, but things to play with. And again, if you aren't going to use the other transforms, just delete them. They don't hurt you having them here, but they're extra things being created that aren't actually being used. So, or just do a min height, min width. Yeah, something like that can certainly help as well. In this case, I don't know if min height and min width will work, simply because of where we're trying to put this. But yeah, something to that degree just to make sure that they're bigger. And again, the risk factor here is so minor. Yeah, max. In some cases with these types of bugs, like it causes a problem with the app. In this case, it causes you to see the end of a line. Low impact bug. Okay. What we were actually here for, this save button. So this is bound to save command. And this thing here, if we look, should be save command. Okay, perfect. We're bound up. Excellent. So we're going to do this. We're going to launch. And we'll see what we can do. We'll see what we can do here. Add a task. Bring this window over here. Test. Save. Okay. I don't know if it's going to be unhappy that I didn't fill out all of these things. Okay, current task is null. I think this is going to cause, wait, huh, what? Oh, I must have been looking at a derived property. I could have sworn it said current task was null, and I expected this to throw. Okay, so work started. Actually, real quick, slight detour. I want to look at this log call. Where is this going to? Siri log. Okay. This is definitely one way of doing it. iLogger is the newer API, but that is something that would require switching up from kind of your remodel locator pattern, so we're not going to recommend that yet. Okay, so step in. Okay, let's figure out where we're going here. So we've got connection factory. We create a connection. We are doing, so this is very much raw SQL against SQLite, an insert into the task details table, and popping. So we expect a parameter of task name, project name, assigned to due date, status, priority, budget, completion date. Great. So this here, just so people are aware, this is a fun C# syntax called anonymous objects. Now, this is something that you generally don't need outside of very specific APIs. And this is one of the few cases where anonymous objects are still kind of valid to be used. For most programs that you write, you never want to use an anonymous object. You probably want a value tuple, a record, or something of that nature. In this case, it's kind of valid because it needs an object with these appropriate property names to line up to this. Now, a much cleaner solution is don't do raw SQL, go to EF. But again, that's adding on. Like I realize, Lisa, this is your first app. I don't want to add a lot of extra technology things for you to go and learn because there's a lot out there and it's a deep well. But Entity Framework Core is the way to avoid having to write all this SQL stuff yourself. You just deal with C# objects and it deals with the SQL, which is great, but it is an extra thing for you to go through and set up. So worth noting. Okay, this here is catching my eye. Whenever I see a null coalescing operator with a null on the right, that's the exact same as it not existing. Which then means the name is optional and we can do that. So with the anonymous objects, the properties that will be created on it are going to default to the same name as what's being assigned into them. So in this case, it will have the name of task name, project name, assigned to, and in this case, due date wasn't going to have the right name, so it creates a property called due date and assigns that in. Status, priority, budget, completion date. Okay, so all of that stuff lines up. And we're going to execute. And then let's see. Cannot store type, anonymous type, string, decimal string. So I'm going to go with there's probably a property type mismatch here. So the first thing then to look at is where the database is created. I'm going to go out on a limb and go with the thing called database initializer is where that's done. That would make the most sense. So create table task details. So these are going to have to line up. And it's going to be a little hard for them to not line up. And actually, you know what? Go to implementation. Why are we doing this? What is, because due date and completion date are the only interesting ones here. These are going to be date time properties. I think this whole thing could be a lot simpler. I think that's all you need. Let's try it. Because I think what's happening is your anonymous object is building up properties, and the due date and completion date columns that that your database initializer is going to create is going to be of type date time, and your anonymous object is passing in strings. And so it's saying, hang on, the object that you're telling me to insert has a due date property of type string, but the column is of type date time. So I think that's where it's getting all confused. Test, save. We're gonna move this breakpoint into here. Go to implementation. Here, go. Okay. Okay. Let's see. What is your problem here? The exception was originally thrown at this. Let's see. Run thread pool. That is not useful. Cannot store type. Okay, well, let's go back then. I think though, if that's the key, well, hang on. Let's validate my assumption first. I am assuming the types of those columns. There is a tool I like. And I need to go find it because I can't remember the name of it. Yes. Okay. So I think. Let's see. Okay, so that is not showing up. Let me go find it real quick. So there are a lot of these tools out there. Actually, let's just do this. Winget search. I think. Yeah, SQLite Studio I've used before. Beekeeper I've used before. There's various viewers out there that I've pulled up before. 64-bit Windows. We'll just go and grab this for anybody who wants to play along. If you're doing SQLite work, it is worthwhile finding a browser tool that that you like. I'm just going to download the zip, extract the zip, and launch the file. Yeah, DB browser for SQLite. Yeah, there. And again, there's a bunch of SQLite viewers out there. I even at one point in time contemplated grabbing one myself or building one myself, and decided, nah. Okay, so if we go here, we navigate to our database file. There we go. Okay, so this is worth noting, because if you're ever in here looking at these things, being able to see your stuff. Okay, so interesting. The database columns generated. Oh, I have that. Perfect. That surprises me. It's of type big int. Okay, is checked as an integer. Varchar, varchar, varchar. Okay, I'm going to put this to the side for the moment. And we're going to go back and double check these. Okay, so we don't need an ID because that is the auto incremented PK. Probably stored as an epoch. Yeah, that would be my theory. Let's see. Task name varchar, so that's string. Project name varchar, also string. Assigned to string. Where is the? Trying to remember the. I want to look at the modified table. There, that's actually more what I'm interested in. So everything is nullable. Everything is nullable. Hey, acid rain, how we doing? Okay, everything's nullable, so that's fine. Okay, so the question then is, well, here, let's diagnose this the following way. Theory, that's the problem. Okay, so status, priority, budget. Budget's a float. What is this thing here? A decimal. We're gonna hard cast this. I'm trying to remember the must be declared with a member assignment. Oh, got it. Thank you. I think this might just need to be a double. I think float in SQLite translates across to double. Completion date is checked. Is not in the lineup. So we're fine there. And then we're going to drop out. So let's drop a due date. We're going to drop due date out of here. And we're going to drop completion date out of here. And we're going to see if that much works. Okay, let's give that a shot. It's been a while since I've done raw SQLite stuff, so this is interesting. I assume execute scalar is acceptable here. Invalid operation, no value. System nullable value dot get. Oh, it does execute scalar limit you to with arguments oh, hang on. Arguments to substitute for the occurrences of a query. Oh, do these not support named arguments? Interesting. Actually, you know what? Let's try something really crazy. I'm gonna try something really crazy here. Ready? Let's see. Alt autocode button. Cool. Why is this failing to insert? There. Copilot, impress me. Impress me, Copilot. Insert a new task in the task details table. How it seems that there may be an issue with the execution of the command. It is important to ensure that the table name and column names on the insert statement match. Yeah, did that already. Additionally, make sure that the data types of the values being inserted match the data types of corresponding columns in the table. That's what we were working on. Another possible reason could be related to the connection, but it is unclear how this method is implemented. It is possible, blah, blah, blah. That's not it. Let's see. Double check the column names and the data types to ensure they match the table schema. Ensure the connection string and database. Check for any error messages. Blah blah blah. Blah 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 blah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Copilot. You've told me exactly what I already knew. So go away. Thank you. Okay. So we're going back to what I was doing because Copilot useless. Sweet. Great to have you around, Acid Rain. Okay. Because I can't remember my raw SQLite, we're going to try this and see what happens. So when in doubt, get it down small enough to where it works, and then we're going to work backwards. So everything's nullable, so Copilot chat definitely not as magical as inline. Yeah, so the Copilot chat on this side is the next best thing to worthless, just in my opinion. I have yet to see this thing work well. And I think a big portion of it is it lacks context, whereas the inline one has context. So this one maybe for general coding guidance, but dear heavens, some of the stuff that it's suggested has been verging on maliciously bad. Inline one is probably not bad. Fun story. I was at Microsoft Ignite. I was working the VS Code booth. There were 5 of us there. Not one of us a Python developer. Like, some of us could do a little Python, but that was it. We wrote Pong without writing a line of code. Inline Copilot chat did all the work. It was remarkably impressive. Yeah, it's probably using GPT 3.5. I think there's a separate model that they have trained, and I don't remember what it is. So it's not the GPT model, but it's one of the OpenAI models that's specifically for code that was trained on Copilot-y stuff. So it had I'm trying to remember the details of it. I like the language processing. It would not shock me if it was GPT. Okay, does this work? No. Cannot store type string, nullable decimal. Okay, so the next logical one is the decimal one. So we're going to pick on budget next because you are the next likely culprit. Because I know SQLite doesn't support decimals out of the box, decimal is a type that exists in C#, but it's not a common enough floating point type. And it's only there to support currencies, which in this case, budget is kind of a currency value. So, it makes sense to use. Okay. Okay. What did I do wrong? No, I removed it all the way out. Cannot store type. Anonymous type. Bind parameters, bind all. Okay. String. Task name, project name, assigned to, status, and priority. Now, I'm not brilliant, but task name, varchar, project name, varchar, assigned to. Now I'm double checking the spelling of all these to make sure I'm not just missing something a little bit. Status, priority. Right? Okay, so next thing. Right? I want to execute. Let's just hypothetical. Oh, it's not a new line, is it? No, it should be tolerant to that. Okay. Let's see. Value test null. Oh, I'm sorry. It probably wants capital null. 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 Okay. Run. Okay. It inserted. Okay. So the next logical explanation is that it's supposed to be not named parameters. Let's test that theory. It's using link. No, it's even dumber. This is lower level than that. And the only reason I'm thinking this is specifically the docs on this method call out putting in a question mark in the command text for each of the arguments and executes that command. So, working theory, we're going to do test 2 now. Save. Cannot store. Okay, what is the, am I just misunderstanding this? Oh, I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot. Okay. 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 That is okay. 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 I think I got it this time. I couldn't read. Okay. Hang on. We're gonna test to make sure I'm not crazy. We can't eliminate that as a possibility. Database is locked. Okay. The database is likely locked because I have this thing open. You want to save the changes? No. You want to save the changes you made to the database file? No. Discard. Thank you. Okay, let's try this one more time. And I think we finally got it. And then I will back up and explain what I think I now understand. Okay. Test. Save. Ding, 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 ding. Huzzah! There we go. Okay. Turn result 0. That's interesting to me. I kind of expected the initial insert to be a 1. But let's close this real quick and confirm that the data is actually in there. Shoot, did I close down my folder that had it? Gotta go open up my DB browser again. Okay, I'm gonna leave that folder open on that monitor. That way I can go back to it. Okay, open database. Do you remember? Do you not have recent databases? Is that not what that file? There we go. Boom. Okay, browse data. Okay, so it's interesting that I got back a 0. That part doesn't make sense. However, this much does. Let's see. The number of rows modified as a result. So the int returned here is not going to be the last record ID. Let's take a look here. I think there's a create table, delete, insert async. Yeah, so we can probably get ourselves down much simpler. So, okay. We're gonna before we change this. So, here is what I believe is going on. 1, the named parameters and execute scalar async are not synonymous with each other. So, looking at the docs when I F12 on this guy, specifically, it wants a command written in SQL where the arguments to the command are replaced with question marks. This means that they're going to be positional. So the first question mark is going to line up to the first parameter, second question mark, second parameter, etc. The first parameter passed to execute scalar async is the SQL query string. And then there's a params array, which means an arbitrary number of arguments after that, that will be replaced with the question mark. So if you have 3 question marks, you need to have 3 things after the SQL string. So here's our SQL string. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 question marks. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 values. So you don't need an anonymous object, just straight values, and it'll insert. The reason why we're getting the 0 is there's 2 SQL statements here. The insert into and then the select last row ID. Now, the problem being is the returned value here indicates the number of rows modified, which in this case, we're always just inserting a single record. So even if we switched it to this, my strong assumption without testing is that we would always get back a 1 returned, because it's always going to be inserting a new single record into here. So as long as the query succeeds, we get a 1. Right? You could imagine if this was like an upsert or something potentially different. But because this select doesn't actually modify any rows, what we're actually getting back is a 0 every time, which is not quite what we want. Right? So execute scalar is probably the wrong call. So for all that work and now making sense of it, I think we can get back to something simpler, and I think you can just go insert async, new task, and I think what we can do here, let's just double check the docs on this guy. Inserts the given object and updates its auto incremented primary key if it has one, which it does. The object insert, the number of rows added to the table. Perfect. So this we can do here, and then we don't need this. And then, so I fully expect result in this case to be a 1. But what I also expect to happen is this task details instance to have its ID properly populated on it. So it should set this ID property for us. Let's see. So why wouldn't you do new object array and then your new task name and the rest there? Curious. Good question on the params array here. So you certainly can. We'll just do this so it shuts up for the moment and then put this back. Because this guy here has params in front of it. The params keyword instructs the compiler to look at what is passed here and automatically wrap it up in new object array for you. However, there's nothing stopping you from doing new object array yourself. Because occasionally you might want to say dynamically build up an array rather than initially specifying all of these individual values. And it's a little unhappy about the nullability, but whatever. So you can do this as well. And this is functionally the exact same. It's just that this involves a lot more typing. And this involves the compiler doing it for me. So I'm a big fan of not doing work. So we're gonna let the compiler do the heavy lifting for us. Yeah, no, great question. That's one of the nice little subtleties of the what I do wrong. I did not fully comment this out, and the compiler is confused. Okay. So picky. It always wants me to do things like use proper syntax and that kind of thing. Hey, look, we've got our test. Now I have to pick a new name. Test 2. All right, so save. Now we come in here. So just to be clear, new task does not have an ID set. It's new task of 0. Now, my assumption is that result, after I press F10, is going to go to 1, and new task ID is going to go to 2. Because there's already 1 record in the database, so the next auto-incremented ID would be 2. Right? Boom! Exactly as we did. So, this comment here, this will be the new task ID. This is incorrect. but let's look at the call site and see what it's doing with it. So this looks like this is never using the return value here. So I oftentimes like to do this. When an async method has a return value, and it's being ignored, I will oftentimes put a discard character in just to make it explicitly clear that I am intentionally calling this and throwing away its return value. It's just a way to make it a little more obvious that that was intentional rather than accidental, right? Because when I look at this, I don't know whether it was an accident that the new ID wasn't used anywhere or whether it was intentional. I assume the intent was probably to use it later, or similar. So if the idea is to keep this working rather than result here, the other option is new task.id, right? However, the caller already is going to have access to this ID via this. Because we are mutating this instance, whatever task they pass in is going to get mutated and have its ID. So the caller could just look at the same instance that it passed in and look at its ID property and get that working. So that there. So one, in terms of the edit, do you want to delete or mark this task as completed? Yes, no, cancel. Now I'm going to assume that that's using a message box. If I do messagebox.show, I bet you I get hits. Look at that. Oh yeah. Let's see. So we have a dialogue service. And we've got message box button and message box icon, but it's implemented with messagebox.show. Which is interesting. In general, messagebox.show is not. It's a very old dated API. Now it's obviously very functional, but you lack a lot of the control that you would get. Yeah, I might posit that this is one of those areas like where the material design library I think does better with its dialog host. But the other thing you may consider looking at too, if you don't like the styling of the material design, yeah, WinForms era definitely. GitHub's Ma apps. So this is the other, I would argue, big name WPF open source library that's out there. And the material design library integrates with this as well. So if you don't, because some people don't like the material design theming, they just don't like it. It gives you some styling changes, but also gives you you can kind of piecemeal it a little easier than like the material design library. It's kind of hard to piecemeal in just the parts you want unless you're really familiar with WPF. But this one gives you a lot, and or gives you a lot, and you can piecemeal in just the parts that you want. Specifically, the part that you may want to be interested in is the base level window. Let's see. Oh, he moved his docs over here. Juan. Let's see. Getting started. Sure. Great. This one, Metro window. So the big thing that a lot of people like right out of the box is rather than using the base WPF window class, if you use the Metro window class, it gives you a window object where one, you have a lot of control over the styling, but it also comes with the ability to leverage a dialogue inside of it. So where's his dialogue? Dialogues, there we are. So So you'll note once you're using Metro window, on the window itself, it has a show message async. So this is the key thing here is rather than a message box, which is just kind of static invocation, this one you actually have to point it to a window and then pop the dialogue on that appropriate window. But it does give you a very similar API to messagebox.show. The big change here is it's asynchronous versus messagebox.show, which is a static, and I don't want to say synchronous, but it more or less is synchronous. It blocks the calling thread ish. And I say ish because if you have like a progress bar up, you'll note your progress bar keeps spinning in the background. Messagebox does some magic to keep processing the message pump, so it doesn't straight up hang the UI, but it hangs the UI. So it's weird. It's a specially thing. Whereas async and await plays a little nicer. So possibly something worth looking at. Okay, so the next thing I think I'm gonna play with here. Let's see. How do I get to the? I double click. It doesn't pop me into an edit view very nicely. That is probably here. No. Grid view model. Let's see. Task, selected task. Your double click command. Love it. So it takes in selected item. Got it. So the issue here, the reason when I double click it's not coming through is because there's nothing that's actually populating this guy all the way through. So in general, one of the things that you'll often see happen is something like public void load existing, and then in this case it'll be something like existing task, and then you'll do populate values, right? So for example, it's the task name gets existing task task name, stuff like that, right? So now if we go back, the only other thing that we need here is we kind of want to keep this instance. So task details, this is C# pattern matching. So this will validate that selected item is of type task details and non-null. So then we can do task edit view model, and then we can do load existing task details. Now I'm curious why I'm gonna be a little nitpicky. Generally, we only do the Pascal case for methods and properties. Minor preference. I think, let me look. I think we covered that here. Let's see. After C#. Yeah, so it's probably in here. Let's see. Where do we put the coding conventions? Properties, declaring, expression bodies. Property and field guidelines. Hey, look at that. It's almost like, yeah, this thing. Yeah. Boom. Okay, shameless self-promotion. Here we are. Okay. So free C# resource. I may be the technical editor for it. I may be slightly biased in its favor. Also, if you find bugs, please use the little feedback button in the top right-hand corner or message them to me. Yeah. Benjamin's in the chat. He may be biased as well. Okay, so okay, let's do. Okay, so we have here, we have load existing, that goes there, that goes there, that goes there. Okay, so now when we double click, we should at least see our task name repopulate. And then that should, we go here, and huzzah, we get this repopulated. Now, in theory, what we would want to have happen is when we load existing, the task edit view, we would probably want its save method to be a little more intelligent. Let's see, where was that? Oh, we already have a current task property. We probably want to do something like current task gets existing task. I kind of want to just check usages of this to make sure there's not another assignment to it that I'm missing. Nope, that's the only assignment. Let's see. Do you still think fields should be Pascal case, or have you changed stances on that? Oh, you hit on a lovely, lovely debate. I think of all of the coding guidelines on that site, that is the most controversial of them all. So the justification behind that is by naming fields with underscore Pascal case, it brings them more in line with properties. And in general, fields are typically only accessed via the wrapper property. Now, there's a couple cases where that doesn't work well. Specifically where a field is required because you're going to use it as a ref parameter later on for maybe an interlocked statement or similar. Like that happens. I oftentimes have worked around that coding guideline by just using auto properties and calling it a day. But some people like the explicit nature of read-only fields better, and functionally they're identical. There's really, especially if we're talking about private, there's really no major difference between them, aside from casing and whatnot. I think what I would prefer is just going through and changing the guidance on fields to not nearly be as stringent on it. The hard part is the underscore camel case versus the underscore Pascal case is the default. And I think to make a recommendation that is different from the VS defaults, I think you have to show not necessarily that it's better, but that it is enough better to warrant people's default setting, which the Visual Studio defaults are everyone's default setting. So if you're going to change off of those, you have to show enough usefulness from it. And I don't think that subtle naming thing is enough of a useful thing to matter. So, oh, and the rename is slightly easier. Another small minor advantage. Yeah, there's a few minor things, but I don't. And this is where the subjective nature of it is going to come into play. I will say I don't think that those advantages are weighty enough to override people's defaults. But that's a completely subjective opinion. And I do, which is why I kind of think that the guideline should be downgraded to like a consider. So I don't know if there was necessarily a decision for them to go with underscore camel case originally. There was a people will find the old Microsoft coding guideline docs. Then they will also find conflicting docs that were put out by the runtime and SDK teams that are still floating around the internet as well, that don't align, that include things like Hungarian notation. And then other people will go as far as to like actually open up the repos for like the SDK and the runtime and point out that even those teams don't follow either set of guidelines. So it's there's not a good method put forward by the team itself, and because these things are not exposed, like you're not going to find public field names in the public API of the SDK. And the public fields that you're going to find are going to be like static read-only things, right? Of maybe like a size.empty or something. So you're not, and in those cases, there is no underscore because they're functionally being treated as like read-only, and they're public that way. So it's one of those that even in those cases, now that they're public, it's the decision to expose a field is very much against the guidelines, but it's done in very specific cases. And so it's necessary. Gwid.empty being another common example. I'm pretty sure gwid.empty is a field, not a property. Now I'm curious. Yeah, field. So there is a field being exposed in the public API that doesn't match, that's not an underscore prefixed one, right? And you could argue it's basically a constant. It's only a static read only because it has to invoke a constructor and blah 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 blah, right? Like there's little things like that. But yeah. Yeah, and that's the exact thing there is it's not the default setting. More code is written with underscore camel case fields. And so the thing I will always tell people is I don't care what naming convention you pick in your repo. I care that you're consistent though. So you can't not have a coding convention. That's bad. So you must pick one, and I don't care that much about what you pick. For all if you went with Hungarian notation, which is arguably one of the ugliest things out there, I'm actually okay with that if you're consistent with it. Like if I work in your repo and that's what you've set up as Hungarian notation, so be it. I will play by those rules. But as like for the essential C# putting forward guidelines, I think I would propose downgrading it at least to the field naming to just to consider and dropping it out of our default editor config. I think that would be my recommendation because I don't know if there's enough value add there. Okay, so I wanted to validate that I could update these things too. So because we set current task, and then on these, because I noticed that the on save, where is the save? Right. So now we should hit update task async. Right. So because now we have the code is specifically, go to implementation. Thank you. The code is specifically checking for an ID and then saying update. And I think we're going to have the same thing here. Connection, update async. And I think we can just do this. Boom. And all of this goes away. We don't care about any of this. So we can get rid of all of this. Because we don't need to do the execute bits. And then, so we're going to await this. Int num changed. Let's see. I think this is what it is. Updates the columns. The object is required to have a primary key. The number of rows updated. Now, I don't understand how a method like this would ever update more than one row. Yeah, the object to update, it must have a primary key attribute, which task details does have a property with the primary key attribute set on it. So we're good. We're good. So this is number of rows changed, and this actually just to keep consistency, task.id. But again, I think when we looked at this before, the only invocation of this, oh, there's two places invoking this. This one here, and show me the other one. Find all references. And this one here, and neither one is using the return value. So it's possible that that just is to do for later, but we'll see. So if I come in here and I double click, I now get this opening. I change this to edited. I hit save. And it just works. Mwah! Mwah! Now we may want to make this window close at that point. So let's do that real quick. Let's see. So here we come into here, we come into here. So here is one of the ways that I like to do this window closing bit. All right. So this guy here, I think I just closed where I was at. Yeah, so this is show modal. And then you'll note this thing is doing a refresh if the modal closes with a true, which is fine. However, you'll note that because we're mutating the underlying instance, it updates before even without doing this refresh data. So this is technically not needed, depending on how you want to handle it. Ta-ta for now. Off to start work. Thanks for the app feedback. Let me know when you push an update. Play on my lunch break. Oh, yes. Sorry, I said I was going to do that. From stream. So to answer your question on when the branch is, just my musings from the stream. Commit and push. Boom. Commit. Poof. Stream it. It is up and off to the races. So I will, in case you're already gone, I will send you a message on Discord. Oh, you're still there. Perfect. I will not send you a message. Okay, so let's have this guy go through and do this. So go to implementation, because this is doing a window and then a show dialog here. So one of the nice things that I like doing is so you don't have to follow this pattern, but this is a pattern that I've used this a bunch when I've needed it. Public interface, I request close. Let's do event handler, bool. Let's close. Dang nab you, Copilot. Freaking show off. Got it wrong though. Ah, see, still the developer, jerk. Copilot likes to be the kid in the back of the class that shows off. Ha 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 ha. There you go, Copilot. Boom. Okay, so couple new types. So what we are going to do is we're going to go up on this view model and we will do I request close. And then this will give us an event. So wherever it went, where did it put it? There it is. Okay, and then all we're going to do here is we're going to slap on the nullability, because events by default are null until somebody registers for them. You'll see an old school pattern where some people, to work around this, will do this maneuver. which just always, rather than it defaulting to null, it always just registers an empty handler that can't really be unregistered. So it ensures that it's non-null. I personally just declare it nullable and deal with the null with a question mark in a moment. So, and then we can come down here, and what we'll do is we will do request close, and then this is where we do the question mark to make sure that if it is null, we'll do this as the sender, new request close event args, right? And I don't know, I implemented those as cancel event args, but maybe we don't care. Yeah, we're gonna just make these event args. We'll just do event args. If you want to implement cancellation, deriving from cancel event args is another way of doing it. And then dialog result true. Okay, builds it up. We could add an overloaded constructor in here or something. Yeah, something like that. Something. Okay, but the nice part is you have this nice little modal service here. So what we are going to do here is we are going to do view model, or how about if view model is I request close view model. I want this below here. We might do this a little differently, but here's what we're going to do. Request close view model, request close plus equals, and then we're going to do something like this. Really, Copilot? Okay. Again, Copilot is the obnoxious kid in the back of the class that just will not shut up. But that's actually not what I want. I want a local function. So void on request close. See, Copilot, you got it wrong. You got it wrong, Copilot. Boom. Okay, so we're gonna do that. We're gonna bring this guy, this local function up here. Let's see. So it's unhappy that and it's not window.close, it's windows. So if window, we'll just do this. It's a local variable. We can get away with that. Dialog result gets e.dialog result. Boom. Okay. And then this goes here. So the big idea here is if the, what is your problem? The parameter types don't match, possibly because of nullability checks. There. Shut up. Thank you. I know, Copilot, you would have done it right, and I got it wrong. So if the view model implements this interface, this guy is going to register up for this event. If this event is raised, it's going to check the window. The reason we have to do this null check here is because it sees that this is a callback, and it doesn't know whether window will still exist and be non-null at the point we've reached this callback. So we got to do a bit of a null check here, and functionally, what we know is that this is always going to be true. It might be reasonable to do the bang here with how we're about to set this up, but yeah, whatever. But there's a slightly weird thing that we've done now. This has now subtly given our view model a reference to this modal service in a very indirect way because of the way this is set up. So the one thing that we need to make sure that we do is also unregister this event. Otherwise, we're going to end up potentially leaking. And it's not a big deal. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go something like var. So I use RV for return value. Okay, what we would like to do is actually make sure that this guy always gets unregistered as well. So, and this is where I was like, I don't know if I like this. So what we're going to do is this guy here. So, and we're going to do view model as I request close. Boom. If we're going to change this is not null. Boom. And then we're going to do down here, we're just going to unregister it. Just to make sure we don't accidentally leave something floating around out there, right? So now, if we fire this guy up and we edit it, it should. So we double click this guy to get into edited. Backspace, backspace, backspace. Save. There we go. There we go. There we go. So there's a little bit to deal with here. And there's maybe some positioning issues here with the once the scroll bar pops up, it's kind of floating off in different spots. But after that, I think the rest of this is now just implementing kind of the rest of these features. So a couple points to point out here. Let's see. So key things on this is not that. Where's the service? Yeah. So for the database stuff, if you're going to continue using the low-level SQLite stuff, which is fine, just be aware that this is low-level work, which means you get less convenience but uber control. But rather than going to the raw SQL, leveraging a little bit of the nicer functions for doing the insert or the update. I assume there's going to be similar things. So this one here, I think your connection delete. This has an overload. Yeah, so it does have object primary key. So I think this one is going to end up being... Now this one is probably working just fine. Because I'll also note here, this is the question mark put in. This is scary. Delete selected tasks async. Because this is not actually deleting selected. This is just doing a straight delete. So you probably want to pull the selected items and then iterate over them doing something like this. Probably. I believe what you can do here though is ID. What is table mapping? Why does it need? Oh, used to identify the table. This is, I believe, like this. Task details. So I believe your delete call looks like this. So you can either pass in the whole object, or you can pass in the... I'll leave this one commented. So you can either use delete async and pass the whole object, or pass the ID, and then you have to, because if you're just passing an ID, you have to tell it what table to go at. So it needs some knowledge of what the target table is. But this, leveraging these methods rather than the raw SQL, is probably safer in most cases for what you're looking to do. And then you don't have to deal with a lot of this stuff, and it will just work under the hood. The other thing I wanted to check on is I think connection is disposable, isn't it? Is connection not iDisposable? Could have sworn... this thing was disposable, but maybe I'm making that up. It is not iDisposable. Close async. That's interesting. I'm a little surprised that that is not. I'm very surprised it is not. I realize it's got a close async. Interesting. Interesting. There may be a problem there where the close actually needs to be invoked at the end as well. So I don't know if it's actually needed, but you may need to do. I would probably have to check the docs and see if you start running into weird database problems where SQLite connection pool shared. Interesting. Get connection. What is this doing? Is this watching the... Yeah, if you start getting issues with like connection pools saying no connection available or connection timeout or similar, there is entries, try get value, unique key. Yeah, there's potentially. Yeah, and the unique key may be saving it from opening multiple, and you may just need to make sure that you don't accidentally have two open connections at the same time. Regardless, something to keep an eye on. But I think I would work on changing out this repository here. The nice part about what you've done with this structure is that if you did decide that you wanted to do something like entity framework, most of your code could remain fairly ignorant. This is kind of one of the reasons why a lot of people like this repository pattern, is because in theory, what they do inside the repository is segmented away from the rest of the application. It goes through and you can swap out, maybe you write a file later or similar, and change it up. These task ints might need to be, or might need a little thought about what their intended purpose should be, is because when you call, for example, new task async, is the intent for this int to be the new primary key? If so, it should probably get used somewhere. Or is the intent to have this thing get mutated? If the intent is to have this guy be mutated, it may be worth considering just making this a task. That way, when you're looking at this API, it's a little less confusing. Because when you have an API like this, there's always the question of, hey, does my object get mutated, or does it return a value, or does it do both? Right? And it's without documentation, just from this signature, it's not clear which it is. That I think is good. I don't know if there's much more. I think those were the. I think there was all the. Can we change all types here to T1 and T2, so on? Oh, in the repository. Yeah. So the suggestion here is doing like this, because all of these things are like that. You can leverage generics to make this a little bit cleaner. So what I might do instead, hang on, before I. So one slightly cleaner or slight improvement that might be worth considering. Let's do public interface I task repository. All right, so we're gonna do this first. Then you do something like this, and you do something like this. So you introduce a generic parameter, and then you replace all of these guys with the with the generic. And then this guy here, you simply do I repository of task details. And so now you've functionally gotten the same thing, but if you ever want to introduce another data type or another repository, you've already got the pattern laid out. Now, what I would probably do is also this as well, because iRepository is a little generic. And in theory, this should still compile with the rest of your code without, yeah. So because the rest of your code is still seeing task repository as having the members, get all tasks. This one probably, I would probably look to drop the word task out of each of these method names on here. Update async, delete async, new async. Because it is a little redundant to have task both in the interface name and on the methods themselves. But again, these are minor API level things, and not always a big deal if this is just a solo app for you. Task rename to item. Yes, that would definitely be one option. New item async. Or oftentimes rather than the word new, there's a pattern called CRUD. What was it? Create, rename. No. Create, update, delete. What is the R? Rename? It's not remove. That would duplicate. Rename. It must be rename. CRUD. And now it's going to bother me. Read. Right. It's the get operation. So, oftentimes you'll see people with the repository pattern name things following this CRUD pattern, just because it's a common thing to go through and implement. So because once you have all four of those, you can theoretically do whatever you want. Okay, on my screen, Twitch did not do that link properly. It didn't like the commas. Punch CRUD into your Bing search engine of choice, and you're off to the races. But yeah, so hopefully, Lisa, that was helpful. And overall, again, I think for a first app, this is pretty good for your very first time out. Yeah, that's not bad at all. One of the things that I do want to consider doing on my WPF template is adding in, and the more I think about it, I may make it a second template rather than switches on the existing one. But I've been thinking of adding in additional database stuff and web API interactions and that kind of thing, because people want to see what that could and should look like, especially in a fully featured thing. So that is a worthwhile thing. I think I may consider doing. The other thing, and I gotta highlight this real quick. This was one of the biggest announcements that dropped, is .NET Aspire. And the thing with .NET Aspire is there's not a lot here that you couldn't do on your own prior to .NET 8. There's a little bit in here that they of some magic stuff that they had to do with this extra host. But if you're familiar with MS Build and abusing it, you can get a lot of this yourself. If you go and look at what they're generating, a lot of it is just a good structure. And so this is Microsoft going through and saying, okay, building out cloud applications, our default project templates are not opinionated enough. People don't know what correct looks like. Aspire aims to give you correct with file new project. Out the gate, we're going to have a full-blown production ready. I don't know if that's kind of right. service that we can go out and deploy. And more importantly, it's going to show multiple microservices, how to get them talking together in a container environment. It's going to set you up for being able to leverage things like Dapper or Kubernetes Service Mesh. For all of that, it's going to give you a dashboard with logging so that and appropriate tracing with open telemetry right all the way built in, like all the stuff out of the box. It is opinionated, but it is a good opinion that they took. They tried to build everything on the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. They are governance body for cloud native stuff, not .NET specific, but the position that they took for Aspire for their default template follows the CNCF guidelines of what good cloud computing is. So if you're doing anything web, microservice-y, cloud native related, this is for you. Check it out. It is absolutely awesome. Like, it demos really well because you can go from 0 to hero in a 30-minute session. Like, it's pretty slick. So yeah, check out the blog post. I believe there was a session on this either in .NET Conf or Ignite. I don't remember which. But yeah, this is the guy who walked up behind me and said, "Hey, can you teach me about .NET?" And I went, no. No. You were one of the guys who helped build Aspire. That means I cannot teach you. You probably know more than me. So, cool. Well, thank you everyone for coming and hanging out. Benjamin, should system command line show args in the help menu automatically, or is there some kind of setup to get that to work? Let's see. The system command line will show args in the help menu. I'm trying to think here. So it will only show args for the root command by default, unless you do -- help on a subcommand. It will not show them in the same section as where the options go. And you probably want to make sure that you've given your arg a name. Otherwise, I think you just get alligator brace arg or something to that effect. I don't remember. If you don't give it a name or description, it might get omitted. I don't remember the exact rules on that. But as long as you're giving the arg at least a name, it should be showing up in the synopsis section, the very first part of the help, where here I could keep talking about it, or I could just .NET -- help. Boom. All right. So this section here, the usage, it should at minimum be showing you your arguments there. This is probably a bad one because the .NET team has they ran their own help builder. I get commands if I just run the tool name, but if weird, I get commands if I just run the tool name. Yeah, shoot me a message and I can take a look and see what's going on. But in theory, the default help builder should handle all that for you. Anyway, with that, it is nearly midnight for me. Hopefully that was interesting for people. Again, I absolutely love code reviews. So if people have an app that they would like to have reviewed, or there's something that you're struggling with, I am very happy to go through and review it on stream. I try to be kind to the developer and still pick on the code. So hopefully no one takes any offense to anything said. It's all intended to just make code better, and hopefully people learn things. So, and yes, happy Thanksgiving, at least to those of you who are in the United States. It is coming up tomorrow. Please spend time with family and whatnot, as that is typically the primary experience for the holiday here. I know my family is hosting a lot of people. I think there's 24 coming. My house is going to be very busy tomorrow, and I have a lot of house cleaning to do before everyone shows up tomorrow. So that will see this one. Will we see a New Year's squirrel with a hat in the background? So yes, but Justin Bieber, I have a firm position that I don't do Christmas stuff until after Thanksgiving. So, yeah. So, you will see Robert come back, my Christmas squirrel, because it is an awesome thing. So, with that, I will tell everybody happy coding. Enjoy the holidays. Check out Ignite and .NET Conf. See everyone next week.